is an absolute magician. He's set up for...
Hello and welcome to another weekly episode of Training is an Absolute Livestream. As you can see, we're down to two people today. Christian is off for the week, but you've got myself, Steve Haller, and Andy Pregler. How we doing, buddy? Fair enough. Not everybody is Didier Drogba, my friend. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it takes a certain skill level to be able to actually pull it off and pull it off well. So don't feel bad if you're not at that at said level for that. Yeah. If you do, you're going to get paid a lot of money. Yep. Really? Hmm. All right. We're winging it. Okay, so now that you've heard half of our conversation, I'm going to sit here and try and figure out a way to make it so we can hear Andy. Let's see if that is helping. How about now?
You've got this, Steve. I'm pulling up I've got the YouTube thing up. So, but the funny thing is that we're just like a little bit behind, so I'm not gonna know for sure if we're good. So I'm not here.
I think we might have you.
Think we're good now. I'm hearing you say winging it. Half the conversation. So
this is enthralling for anybody watching live.
Yeah. You should keep vamping and talking while I listen and confirm if I'm live.
Yeah, that's
we're good.
Oh, hey, we got it. Okay. Thank you, OBS, for dropping a new version and completely screwing me up coming out of the woods from camping all weekend. So, yeah. Where were we? You're not Didier Drogba. So that must have really confused people if they just thought I was randomly talking about Didier Drogba, which, as you can see by the color of my room, is probably not a weird thing completely, but it's not completely normal. But for the Cliff Notes, Andy was hungover, played soccer, played hold-up striker, is not Didier Drogba, is going to be working on it.
Yes.
With all that said, the podcast hearts go out to Christian Eriksen. I had to drop that out there because, oh my God, if anybody was watching on the Euros, Eriksen went down with some what seemed to be some major heart issues, cardiac arrest for a 29-year-old professional soccer player. We'll see how it pans out, but I don't want to thoughts and prayers anything, but thoughts and prayers to Christian Eriksen.
It's always terrifying when you watch a sport and there's a non-contact injury and they just fall. Typically, I have seen it with Achilles or ACLs where there's at least some acknowledgement of this human being alive and having pain. That was terrifying to watch. Yeah, and absolutely. I feel for all of the players who had to finish that game after like experiencing that as a team, and they're now going to have to go through the rest of this tournament, which is like a big deal for Denmark. Like, this is a big deal that they're a part of this tournament, that they're part of this group, that they are not considered to just be like cannon fodder, no pun intended for the Spurs fans. And there's if they can even just get through this entire tournament with respectable results, they don't have to win another game. But if they can just get through this, like that goes so much mental fortitude that's going to take to survive this as a collective and as a team, as a national organization.
Absolutely, and that, I mean, the Euros, it puts a heavy hand on the Euros from here on out to see where everything's going to go. But off of the sad
Euro
vegetables
team that you're cautiously like, all right, let's root for this team. Or I'm most interested in this team.
I always have to go with the and I did it for the last World Cup as well. Go with the genetics pick and root for Poland. So Poland's hopes literally are just riding on the ability for Lewandowski to not keel over, which I don't even know if he's deemed healthy again after finishing the season injured with Bayern. So we'll see how that goes.
It's a great tournament. I love the Euros. It definitely gets like the World Cup light treatment, even though there are other great international, like African Cup of Nations is always a real fun watch if you can find those games anywhere.
Absolutely. AFCON is like, it's all the best parts of CONCACAF and the best parts of Europe all thrown into one mixer with a bunch of amazingly talented football players in Africa, and it's just great to watch.
I love these tournaments that aren't the World Cup because again, not to turn this into a soccer podcast, we're gonna talk soccer for a hot second here. I really hate these national tournaments where teams just come out with bunker and counter attacking, and that's why I really loved the USA Mexico game that just took place this week, because that was the first time I've seen a U.S. team have success not playing bunker and counter, and it was so much fun, and I forgot what high-level international soccer kind of looks like, and it made me very hopeful and happy for the future of the American program.
Oh yeah, winning the Nations League is a nice lead into watching the Euros, and you'll get your international soccer fix for the entire summer. But much like our sister podcast, we've already spent the first 13 minutes completely derailed, so I'd say we turn it back towards Syracuse.
Yeah, let's do that. There was a couple of things that happened this week that were pretty big. The first and the most reverberating thing to happen was John Desko officially, last time, if you joined us last week, shout out to all those who've been keeping up with us. Last week we broke down the breaking news of Gary Gait being announced as the new head coach because John Desko was going to retire. We really spent a lot of time processing what that meant for women's lacrosse, what that means for Gary Gait, what that means for the future of the program. And I feel like that was the way that most of the discourse took place because this is a new head coach taking over a program. However, this week I felt was much more focused in on who is John Desko in the pantheon of Syracuse coaches? What does it mean for John Desko to retire at this point in time? Like, what is his legacy? And not to make too many parallels, because we will talk basketball in a bit, much like other old aging coaches who have been at one spot for a very long time and have accumulated the highest of highs and some very low lows.
That may or may not be at Syracuse.
At Syracuse. It's difficult to have a succinct summation. That being said, John Desko won multiple national titles at Syracuse as a head coach.
Yeah, he's won the third most national titles of all time as a coach.
Yeah, that is, and even if the most recent results have not been what it's taken, even as the sport has changed and maybe Desko has had some very predictable pitfalls when it comes to roster assembly and it comes to teams that they need to find a way to beat that they haven't. I think, Steve, you pointed out he has won more national titles than all but two coaches in the history of this sport. That is a banner hanging legacy.
And one of them was his predecessor, so
yeah, I think the questions that I have, and not to turn this into a dark conversation, but I do think it kind of has to be noted that this season was not the best on the field. I almost said pitch. On the field and off the field. There was a lot that didn't go right for Syracuse lacrosse, and there were people, not many, but there were people who had this feels like maybe this retirement wasn't as a mutual decision as they kind of made it appear to be. Yeah. Especially considering the rumors that had come out that Gary Gait had basically been built into his contract that he would become the men's lacrosse coach at some point in time. That all kind of being said, it feels like whether Desko wanted to or not, this was the right time to retire. With everything that's happening with the program, with everything that has consistently plagued the program for the last 5-6 years, it feels like maybe he just wasn't going to solve this problem, and instead of watching this completely peter out to the point that maybe we do miss an NCAA tournament, because that was very much on the table this year, instead of getting to that point, we're just going to talk about all the good things you did. We're not going to talk about the last 5 years.
Right. Now, at the same time, yes, they said all the right things at the press conferences. Yes, they, made it apparent that, Gait was his successor, Desko stepped down, blah, 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 go through the motions. One thing between Gait and Roy Simmons III and the Wildpack in general, and Desko himself saying, I'm going to be around the program. It's not like they're shooing him out the door and, all right, kick you on your way out. You're done. Sorry. Like, it seems like they're going to be welcoming to him and that he's still going to be a part of the program, which is the least you could do at this point, I think. But it's at least good to see. Like, there were some interviews with Simmons III that basically he was like, yeah, we want him back, because he's director of lacrosse operations or something at this point.
Yeah.
So he made it apparent that everything was copacetic with Desko, and that it wasn't bad blood or whatever. So we'll see how it all pans out. But it seems like even if it was kind of ushered, that it was still ushered in good faith. If that makes if that phrase can be possible.
Well, I think that brings up a really good point. Is that him being around the program, I don't think it means that we're going to see John Desko being the new color in the booth. I don't think that that's the treatment he's going to get. I think it's definitely going to be a little bit more formalized. It's definitely going to be something where he's got a spot in Manly. He's probably going to get in an office. Maybe he keeps his current office. I don't really know.
Yep.
But there's going to be John Desko moments where we see him, where we hear him talk, where we hear his opinions on things, whether they're orange tinted or not. That remains to be seen.
Yep.
But there's definitely, and I know Christian is definitely the guy to kind of break this down a little bit further, so I'm just going to talk from a very high-level surface, is that Gait kind of dodged the questions about which assistants and coordinators he was going to bring on from outside of the program. And I feel like if you keep Desko around, you really do get into that space where you have the pull not just of being Syracuse, but the pull of John Desko's relationships and his relationship building around the sport, to bring in somebody who hasn't necessarily been a head coach or was a head coach and is looking to maybe take a little bit more of a less pressure role.
Right.
And you cannot just have Desko be the guy to make that reach, make that ask, do all that kind of informal behind the door scenes things that happens with coach recruitment. But you also have Desko in the room to potentially be somebody to talk things out with. And you basically are building a very impressive lacrosse coaching room just with a ton of experience and a ton of winning experience.
Yeah, and it's crazy when you think about it. Desko was on, I believe he was on staff when Gait played, wasn't he?
Yes, I believe that is accurate.
So he was Gait's coach. So it's not like this relationship is something new. It's not like it was just he was the men's coach and Gait was the women's coach. They've known each other for ever.
Yeah.
Very
going long time.
40 something years now. So, yeah, it's kind of crazy. Just to think notwithstanding that there's only been 5 coaches in Syracuse lacrosse history, it's just insane. Yeah, 91. So Desko was an assistant at that point because he finished up in 80. Yeah, I can't even comprehend it.
It's pretty remarkable. You hear sports and you hear college programs talk about like family, and you hear them talk about like the lineage and making sure that people like Syracuse lacrosse is definitively like the standout example of like collegiate um, uh, traditions and taking this to like the next level of where,
Right.
listen, if you're going to be running this program, like you had to have been in this program. You have to have relationships with the people and with the founders of this program that are, alive,
Yep.
because it's remarkable. I'm happy. I'm happy for men's lacrosse. This season could have ended very poorly for men's lacrosse, in the sense that we are spending the entire off season focusing on what happened, because what happened was not good, and instead they have completely changed the narrative to focus on what will be.
Right.
And that is the perks of a coaching change. And I credit to everybody who handled this and had a hand in this to make it go so smoothly.
Yeah.
Because there's definitely a way that this plays out where it does, because the leak beat the Syracuse press conference, there's ways that this did not play out as cleanly as it could have. Obviously, we're still waiting on news on who's going to fill in for the women's head coach. It seems like Brent Axe's report, I know Stephen Fonte and Brent Axe had conflicting reports about Kayla Trainer's interest in the job. That has not really been followed up, but the lack of immediate hiring and the appointing of an interim coach does lead me and led Kevin Wall in our Slack to suggest that this search might take a while. Maybe it was because Trainer was the choice and she just said no. Maybe it's because there's just a lot of more dominoes that kind of have to fall behind the scenes with Syracuse and with other programs before they can make that call.
Right. So, from that standpoint, I have no idea how to transition to where we want to go.
Well, we want to talk about the other old guy who's at Syracuse, been coaching for a very long time.
There we go.
Has had some up and down results over the last few years, and we're talking about whether his legacy is going to be defined by these recent struggles or his past success.
See, this is what I get when I actually look at the rundown and the order we wanted to do things instead of just going in the natural order of where it flows. So let's follow that better segue into James Arthur Boeheim and a SB Nation poll regarding what was it? The best active coaches in college basketball at present.
Yes, it is. The question was, with Coach K stepping down, and so obviously Coach K is going to be coaching this season. He's going to get the Jeter retirement tour. Who is the best standing, active, whatever word you want to use, men's basketball coach? And the reason that we posted it was because Jim Boeheim did not make the top 5. So with Coach K, who is the best active coach? Mark Few was the leader in the clubhouse, capturing over 1/3 of responses, followed by Jay Wright, who had a little bit over 20%. Tom Izzo was right behind Wright. Tony Bennett a little bit further down with just under 10%, and Bill Self with right around the same mark as Tony Bennett, but Bennett had a few more votes. So this did I'm really impressed with our commentariat at first, because that comment section quickly identified the most important aspect to this debate. Are we talking about career accomplishments? Are we talking about the totality of these careers of active coaches? Or are we talking about, as somebody who is running a program from an athletic director standpoint, and I need to hire anybody and I have a blank check, no strings attached, I can get whoever I want, who am I taking today to take my team to a national title this upcoming season? And those are two very different answers. And Jim Boeheim definitely deserves to be in the top 5 when it comes to the former, when we're talking about the totality of careers. And I think it's really interesting that we seem to have a general consensus around these parts that he's maybe not top 5 when it comes to the other part of who do I want to lead my program today, which I think is really interesting.
And I'm going to go out there and say it. If the majority of our readers or commentary had stated that he was in the top 5, I would probably ask them to go get their brains checked for some sort of something. And when you look at the list between, Few, Wright, Izzo I question, but Few, Wright, and Bennett are, slam dunks. Izzo and Self are both on the wrong side of the who would you want to lead right now trajectory. Neither are spring chickens by any stretch. You also didn't see Calipari. You didn't see Patino. You didn't see any of the old guard, if you will. So it's kind of interesting to see. And then when you do look at it from a totality standpoint, where do you those two guys have probably got to be in the conversation as well as Izzo and Self, but where does Boeheim fall in that? Is he? He's probably above Izzo. He's probably above Self, or at least around there. But he's probably close to the edge of the top 5 in totality, not just where do you put him in the pantheon of all time active coaches for the overall.
I think the obvious caveat here is that when we're talking about total wins and stuff, we're giving him the wins that the NCAA say that didn't happen. That's not we're not.
I watched those goddamn wins; they happened.
Exactly. I was there for a lot of them too. So this is not something where I'm going to sit back and we're going to play by these weird NCAA stats. That being said, Calipari gets back a lot of Final Four runs because of that,
right.
And he also gets his stats significantly increased because of it.
As does Patino.
And I think you kind of nailed it, is that Boeheim's right on the edge there. And people are going to point to the fact that he's been at the same program for the entire time. He's never had a losing season. Most of these other coaches that we're talking about also have not had losing seasons. They just bounced around from school to school. Right. Because if you are a good program, you do not have a losing season. What matters is getting into the NCAA tournament, winning games in the NCAA tournament consistently and often. Yeah. And Boeheim has won a lot of regular season games and gotten into the tournament a lot of times. And he has a good amount of Final Four appearances. He has a really good amount of Sweet 16 appearances. So he's definitely right around the fringe there. But when it comes to just the consistency of the Final Fours, I think that's where he starts to fall a little bit, because these other coaches, Izzo is a great example of somebody who's just gets to the Final Four a lot. And I think then the argument becomes which of these coaches got teams that could actually win it. And Boeheim's most recent Final Four runs both featured teams that probably couldn't win it. They were just the best of a bunch, and then they got to the Final Four, and they were outclassed by teams that were in that next caliber of actual contenders. There's definitely a case to be made that 87 team with Keith Effin Smart is probably the best team that he's had outside of the Melo team.
Yep.
And that team probably should have won a national title. And again, Sean Keeley has talked about this ad nauseum, about the difference of legacies that Jim Boeheim has with that title being first instead of having to wait until Melo comes around.
Yeah.
I think that's ultimately where we're stuck at.
And that's the thing is, if you look at talent across the roster, 87 was probably better. And the subsequent years, too, were even better than that. 87 wasn't even the most talented team of that stretch. But then you also look at something like 2010, where Arinze doesn't go down with a freak injury, and they walk to that title game. They walk to that title game. They don't walk to the title, but, that's a Final Four. The way they were rolling teams at the end of that year, until goddamn Georgetown dropped their body on Arinze's leg, it was, I don't know, there's so many what ifs in the Jim Boeheim story. And it's maybe that's where we go for off-season content, is the Marvel what ifs of Jim Boeheim.
I mean, I did football last year, so like it would make sense to do basketball this year. And I think that brings up a really good point. And like this is something that obviously I'm not as knowledgeable on. We'd have to bring on James, who has a much better overall college basketball scope.
Yeah.
Because my feeling with this is always every team has what ifs. Every team has those years that are so close, and I'm interested to see what other programs, if they have as many teams that we do, where they feel, oh, if this doesn't happen or if this happens, this coach, this team ends up getting another title. I definitely think Syracuse probably has the strongest case for them because, like you were saying, that Arinze injury was. On paper, statistically, that team was one of the top 3 in the country in Ken Palm rankings. Like, they were dominant.
Yeah, and passing the look test, too. It wasn't just on paper. Like, you watch them, and it was them just kind of rolling folks.
And that was also the year where, like, that was the Butler-Duke title game, where I think that is a great example to bring this conversation full circle. What happens when Coach K and Jim Boeheim square off in a national title game? And what happens, I'm not saying that it does because that Duke team was really good. That scrappy Baylor team gave them everything. And Butler team, not Baylor. I'm getting my Dogs and Bears confused. That Butler team gave them everything and almost won. Like, it was really close.
And now both of those coaches from that title game are retired from coaching.
It's wild.
And one of them is like my age.
Yeah. Well, I think, if Boeheim gets to that title game and Boeheim beats Duke, like, we have Boeheim is the de facto winner of this poll because he's the only one that can then point and say, I beat Coach K in a title game where it counts. Right. And that's the thing that none of these other coaches have. Nobody has the clear trump card, which is why it's a great debate to have. But there is no clear, obvious winner who can pull up and just like hold the belt over his head and say like, I already got the belt. Like now that he's gone, like this is the active one. So
absolutely,
too bad.
Yeah, that's it's so weird. And the legacy that Kay leaves behind is its own animal. Like I really don't envy the person that's going to come into that program. And I believe is Shire officially named the coach in waiting, or is it just assumed that that's going to happen? I don't know if he had a clause like Hopkins, or if it was just like that's what everybody thinks. Any idea there?
I'm not. There's a part of me that goes, they brought in a search firm, they did all the bells and whistles, and like part of it is, you got to scrub through a lot of those old tweets. You got to find all those old social media accounts, and you got to do the work to make sure that like nothing's going to come and bite you in the ass when you hire the guy that you want to hire. That being said, as an Arsenal fan, to continually bring up soccer, like I have seen what happens when somebody like that of that nature retires, even though fans think it's probably time for that person to retire. And I think that we are far enough away from Wenger's retirement to say that Wenger, even Arsenal under Wenger in those last years, is still better than any Arsenal team that they've put out onto the pitch since then. Yeah. And it is a situation where these coaches are really good for a reason. And Arteta is stuck in the situation where he wasn't the guy who followed the guy, but he was the guy who followed the guy who actually took the job right afterwards, because that's what he wanted. He's like, I will not be immediately after Wenger. Right. But because everybody knew what was going to happen, they basically just completely wrote off the guy who actually was like the temporary.
Yeah. Nobody remembers Unai Emery's name, so.
I was literally having a moment trying to remember his first name. But that's the thing. It's like I was like, it's Emery, but what the hell is his first name? And
Bob. It was Bob Emery.
Oh man, this has been a night. But this is the point: is that if you're so blatantly transparent that the guy taking over is not your long-term guy, that you create these issues where a lot of this burden of expectation gets passed on, and you don't solve any of the problems. So I think from a Duke standpoint, there is, okay, do you like this guy? Great. We're gonna make him the head coach. If shit goes sideways, we're Duke. We have a ton of money. We will throw it at somebody and we will get them. If this does go well, if you are truly just a continuation of this legacy, of this family, of this whatever that you have that makes Duke basketball so special,
right?
Great. And we did that, and we can hold on to this until maybe there's another family member who wants to take over this program and has, you know, just as much pedigree, maybe outside of Duke, but somewhere else.
Yeah, and that's you see it a lot at a lot of different, you know. It's funny because I think it's almost more prolific in soccer. You see somebody like Sir Alex retire, and David Moyes did not ring himself in glory during his era following Sir Alex. And, you know, same thing with Arsenal and Emery. It's a weird situation where you've got all the pressure in the world from the senior statesman that's been there, that's, you know, filled your trophy case, and you're the guy following. And if it works out, that's awesome. And if it doesn't, as long as Duke is willing to pull the cord on someone from the family, I think they'll be fine. I just worry that you end up in a situation where, you know, this guy's family, and he's not, that they don't pull the plug quick enough, or that they end up in a situation where they have to ride him out. And I could see something similar happening to Syracuse as Jim Boeheim maybe comes close to the end of his coaching career some year.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll ever actually. I think it'll be very similar to the Coach K situation, where Boeheim just goes like, "By the way, guys, I'm done." Like, it's going to come very out of the blue, but there won't be the retirement tour. It'll just happen.
Yeah, see, I think it might be the opposite, and that if you remember, I don't know how big of a Futurama fan you are, but it's effectively going to be Jim Boeheim's head in a jar, like Richard Nixon's head in a jar on the sidelines. Just, you know, he's still coaching. He's just ahead. He's there. So, yeah, I don't. Legacy. We've talked a lot about it.
It's tough. It's tough thing, because ultimately, you know what the next conversation topic is going to be is who replaces Jim Boeheim. Like, let's actually start solidifying these theories now that we've seen UNC went continuity hire inside. Duke went continuity hire from inside the family.
Right.
So everyone now is just assuming Syracuse is going to hire inside the family. And to be honest, I don't know if enough people have done the digging, but it's clearly going to be one of Autry or Jerry if that happens. And that is some offseason content that we'll need to dig into, because they're two very different coaches. They've had two very different paths, and it says a lot as a program depending on which one you hire. And then, of course, there's also that dude out in Washington.
There's that guy out in Washington. There's that that former point guard down in Southern California that's coaching the women's game. We've already seen we can hire women's coaches to the men's side recently. So, it's going to be funky. And for those who don't know, that's Jason Hart that I'm referring to. Hop's the first call. There's no. You know Jim's gotta give the call to his buddy that has been with him through everything until he got a, you know, Power 5 gig handed to him. Like, okay, that's gonna be the call. But then beyond that, like you said, Red and Jerry are two very different animals when it comes to a continuity hire. So we'll like you said, we'll dive more into that in the offseason. I think continuity is a great way to segue into a complete lack of continuity and what's currently going on the Syracuse offensive line, which yes, I said offensive line. If you have qualms with that, please tune out. Otherwise, time to learn.
Yeah, if this is your first time here, welcome to the fun part.
Yeah. And I even wore my Union football shirt for it, completely unintentionally. So, for anyone who didn't know, Willie Tyler, the former Texas offensive tackle who had committed after Coach Mike Schmidt had come on, and he had talked to Schmidt a couple times and whatnot, has officially decommitted from Syracuse. It's a loss in a body. The Orange currently have 19. They had 20 offensive line players. I don't know. It's a weird how they're distributed is kind of funky, but there were 20 offensive linemen on the roster prior to the departure of Tyler. With him gone, that brings us down to 19, but that's still way more linemen than you normally carry. So Tyler was I think 6'7", really big body, played at two different community colleges before transferring to Texas, transferred from Texas, sat out last year, transferred from Texas to Syracuse, and then decommitted. So it's the journeyman tag fits in well here. He kind of bounced around. He hasn't played a snap of college football in 2 years. Who knows where he was going to slot in, whether it was going to be a tackle, whether it was going to be a guard. He played guard at JUCO. He was playing tackle at Texas. Might have been backwards on that, but either way, he's been played at both. The prevailing thought was that he was going to come in as a tackle to try and challenge Aaron Service, who could use some challenging. But that said, he doesn't have the experience, doesn't have some of the other intangibles that even someone like Jacob Bradford, who came in as a JUCO transfer, or maybe coming in, I can't remember if he enrolled already, but is coming in fresh off of JUCO seasons. So there's a big difference there. I know when he signed, I think I tried to temper the fact that he was going to be, an immediate impact, immediate starter, but more of a backup that was pushing. So overall, you've still got Service, you've still got Anthony Redd, you've still got Mark Petrie. Vettorello's, capable of playing out there if need be. There's some bodies that can fill in the interim. You do also have a project in Garth Barclay, who is a tall body and decent frame, but needed to put some meat on. So we'll see what happened there. Overall, I don't think it's going to be as big of a deal as it initially. Like, the signing was kind of a hype thing, and then it kind of, they're like, oh, offensive line, great. And then when you started looking at it, it's like, okay, cool. Like, that's fine.
The thing with it was that, one, Tyler wasn't on a ton of radars like that Syracuse could grab him because of his pedigree. People saw that he got recruited by Texas. He was a 4-star guy. They saw that he was going from Texas to somewhere else, and so there was this natural thought of he's going to go somewhere big. And so when Syracuse kind of got themselves in the mix and got his commitment, it was a very hyped recruiting signing of, like, here's a big 4-star guy. Here's, like, a potential fringe blue chipper that the Syracuse is adding to its roster. And then, I remember sitting here and doing this with you where you were like, well, dude hasn't played offensive line in 2 years, and we're dealing with an offensive line that needs continuity and needs, some pretty basic, like, technique and consistency over another potential big athletic body. Because, like, to be frank, I think we're at the point where we've got enough big athletic bodies. Obviously, you bring in a blue chipper, you throw that guy on the line, you make it work.
Right.
I think we're beyond the point of saying, like, let's keep trying to add potential upside here. We need to make this work. Because ultimately, whether it's going to work or not doesn't really matter. This coaching staff needs to show that they can build an offensive line and that they can do that consistently even without, like, high-end talent. Because no matter what happens with Dino Babers' system, even though it's becoming more of the norm, it is Alabama, Georgia, all the SEC schools, all the Big Ten schools, they're going to snap up every single blue chip offensive lineman who has NFL size and can also play in a spread offense without dying. That there's going to be unless the kid is born in central New York and his mom and dad basically ensure that this kid is only going to Syracuse, I don't see us ever getting somebody who fits the system perfectly as a blue chipper and it has that pedigree. We're either going to take a big body that might not fit the system and we have to figure out a way to work with that, or we're going to get the less hyped recruits who fit the system better but probably need more work on like true offensive line technique.
Yeah, and that's, I don't know. This whole thing always felt weird from the get-go. So
I appreciate you just being very open with your like, yeah, I'm actually kind of glad this is over because this never made sense from the get-go.
It made sense from a standpoint of him coming on the roster, and like, and I think it's someone that Schmidt probably could have worked pretty well with, but I don't know if it was a matter of him thinking, or maybe Schmidt being more blunt with him and saying, you're going to have to work for this, or you're not gonna step in and, have a spot. Like, we returned all 5 offensive linemen, and from all accounts, everyone was healthy in the spring. So for that to happen, plus to gain eligibility for SEC transfer Chris Bleich, still written down up there, it's a rough situation to come into as a transfer unless you know you're going to be able to bide your time. And
that is, I think, that combined, there might have been academics, there might not be academics. Whenever there's a situation like this, academics has to come into play as a question. Right. But I think you're 100% right. Nobody on this offensive line is guaranteed to return their starting position except for Bergeron. Everybody else is going to definitely, like the way that line performed last year, of course we're not going to give it to everybody.
Right.
You are returning a lot of people. There is some continuity there. There's health now. Just doesn't seem like, unless you played football last year as a blue chipper and we confirmed your talent, I don't think there's anybody who can come in and say, I deserve to play on this offensive line immediately, completely reorder the depth chart for me.
Right.
Speaking of...
Technically, or the year before that, or the year before that. So...
Yeah. I was going to say, speaking of our wonderful depth that we have, there's some great returning continuity for the Syracuse defense. The Syracuse defense, as we've kind of talked about, is we talked about last week, all 3 defensive linemen are returning. There's going to be a bunch of linebackers returning. The secondary is a little bit of a question mark, but we're seeing that the coaching staff has the ability to really coach these kids up in a way that they can be impact players, and Deuce Chestnut is the next hopeful version of that.
Yep.
And it's good to see because at the end of last year, Syracuse's defense, even though it was getting torched because it was on the field for so many snaps, was still producing at a pretty high clip. And according to Pro Football Focus, over the last 3 years, the only team that has hit the quarterback more than Syracuse is Clemson. And when we look at what Syracuse does when it comes to just general quarterback pressures, like I did this week, we saw that they are really, really good at getting into the backfield on a semi-consistent rate. The issue with last year was they weren't so good at it at the beginning of the season, and they got really good at it by the end of the season. The problem was that they would have needed to do it at a absurd, beyond better than Clemson clip in order to make up for the amount of snaps that they were on the field and the lack of anything from the offense.
Now, that said, I'm not a doctor, but the more comfortable you get with the system, the better you look in it. And towards the end of last year, if things kept improving as they kept staying in this system, it almost seems like the system's working and that we're just getting better at playing it.
The 3-3-5 is a lot of organized chaos and confusion, and Tony White is the mad orchestrator of this whole thing. And I kind of talked about it in my piece, and this is what I want to talk to you about, Steve, is that...
Hold on. 30-second time out on this. I need to focus on what you just said. Organized chaos and confusion. He's the orchestrator. Do we need a Tony White as the Joker meme?
Yeah, we do. This is going to happen now. Okay. Photoshop is going to get fired up after this. Cool. But my favorite character from Community. the the point that I want to talk to you, Mr. Mad Football Scientist, about is it really seems the most integral position that Syracuse has a question mark at is the rover slot. Because, again, I keep going back to this amazing breakdown that Shaken in the Southland did with Andre Sisco. Like, Sisco's ability to play that rover and be not just a run stuffer, but a deterrent to a lot of quick outside stuff around the edge allowed for the rest of the system to work very well. And the beauty of the 3-3-5 is that you don't need to have the rover always be that spot, but having that ability really unlocks the full flexibility of the system. Now, the issue with losing Andre Sisco is that he is a third-round NFL talent that Jacksonville is looking to start right away. He's, quote, he's very good, and he was very big NFL ready. There's no one on the roster who has that size that fits in right away, and there's not anybody who really has that experience unless you're going to start getting creative. And I'm interested to hear your thoughts on, one, who you think is probably going to be filling that rover spot, but two, how, if we don't have a Sisco there, how they might be able to still utilize the rover position in a helpful way.
Yeah, and that's God, every time. It's something that's like, it's a perpetual question because that position can be so imperative for this team and what White's trying to do with that defense. Rob Hanna is small. He is probably bigger than he was last year. He cannot be smaller than he was last year. He was 166 pounds, soaking wet with a cinder block tied to him. So I don't think he can be much smaller unless he's on the Taj Harris diet where you don't get above 166. So
weird diet.
Yeah, I have no idea how Taj does it. Like, he always, and he'll like, his weight will grow and he just looks the same on the field. He's just this. Okay, whatever. Back to the defense, but that, I don't know. You had the emergence of Jihad Carter. You had Hannah. You had Amon Greenwood. You had LaBrosse. LaBrosse might be an option to fill in that bigger physical. You know, he's already 6'2", almost 200. Who knows what he comes in at? I don't know if these weights have been updated this year, but you know, those are guys that of the guys I just mentioned, I would say LaBrosse probably fits the physical profile the most. I don't know. We didn't see enough real film of him last year. Like, he kind of was, he was injured and then he kind of came back later in the year, so we couldn't get as many good looks as we kind of wanted to. I think going into the season, we thought he was going to be one of those guys that could have been an impact freshman. We do have the return of Eric Coley, who as a fifth year could, I mean, he played the rover before he went down, before Sisco went down. So, you know, there's the chance he slots back in. I don't know if him coming off the injury would be, you know, something they want to push in that position either. But he also has had more time to recover off the injury than Sisco will to start with the Jaguars. So, I mean, if one injury is not the other, but if you're looking at similar timeframes for both, there's a chance that he could get pegged for that rover position as well. So, all that to say, not a lot. I'm just practicing my best coach speak. There are that secondary, especially the middle three. There are a lot of young guys that got a lot of experience, and outside of Carter, I don't know if anyone is really penned in anywhere. So we'll see. Like, Coley, experienced, but doesn't have a ton of experience in this system because he went down the first week, maybe something like that. So, or did he even play a snap last year?
I don't think he
one game.
Played,
he appeared in one
but
game.
He definitely didn't go down in the spring.
Yep,
he definitely went down early.
Looks like it was the North Carolina game. So yeah, made 4 tackles before he got hurt though. So
it's a good play. I totally forgot about him again because
so did I until I looked at the roster.
So maybe he ends up fitting in that slot. I'm intrigued. I always thought it was interesting. Again, when the original 3-3-5 depth chart came out, and they didn't have the ball hawking interception leading Cisco as the boundary like over the top guy, and they had him as the rover. I thought it was questionable.
Yep.
And then you saw the impact that it had in those early games where teams were really struggling to get any sort of consistency going against that defense. And I think that we found out how important that role is, especially in run support, because as soon as Cisco went down and teams got a little bit more film,
yep,
they were just running the same play over and over, and we could not stop them. So hopefully that doesn't happen this year.
Well, and like you said, Shaking the Southland actually broke it down very well what Cisco's injury really did to this defense, and it was a very well done piece. And the fact that Cisco had as much impact as he did at both positions, whether it be over the top or whether it be as that rover, the impact he had on that defense is something that can't be understated for last year. To have a young, inexperienced defense that was centered around being able to utilize those, especially, the three pieces that got drafted. Two pieces that got drafted and one piece that signed as a free agent, but whatever. To have Cisco go down when he did, and then Coley go down when he did, and then Trill go down when he did. That's literally your three safeties went down with injury. And yeah, there's really not a whole hell of a lot else to say. It did, thankfully for this year, since we lost all three of them, or lost three defensive backs, it gave a lot of other guys some run. And you can't understate how much that will do for them in this upcoming season.
The run that they got is going to end up being like the best thing that comes out of this, because there's just a ton of experience that is there now, and that experience is just so critical to what we need to have as a team in order to better survive just the general injuries that happen, because there are going to just be injuries that take place as the season goes on. Like let's not kid ourselves. Let's not pretend that Syracuse is going to have a 100% healthy season. I do think that there does come a moment, though, where we're going to be forced to put somebody in like a big situation, and we're going to find out that, like, oh wait, because this guy already got snaps last year, they're actually going to be able to handle this pretty well, and that is all we can kind of hope for out of this.
Sounds about right.
So with all of that, Steve, we are almost at time, because somehow we always end up talking about Syracuse for a full hour, even if nothing really happened this week, because something happens that's interesting to us, and that's all that matters. But you know what else happened this week? Loki came out. So if you have not watched Loki on Disney Plus, or you are waiting until the end to binge watch the whole thing, this is where we bid you adieu, and we will see you next week. For everybody else, Steve, you host a podcast that you film right after this, the Multiverse podcast. That is phenomenal. Everybody should subscribe. What's the full name of it so that they know what to search on Spotify?
The Multiverse Report. So you can find it wherever your favorite podcatcher. We're on all of them. But tune in if you feel like listening to an hour of nerd talk after an hour of Syracuse talk.
It is absolutely fantastic. And you're going to talk about Loki a lot there, so we won't go too deep there. But what I do kind of want to talk about, for those of you who are, maybe Marvel casuals, or you're just getting into it, Owen Wilson is a revelation. And for those of you who might not be the biggest Loki fan, because I don't think there are a lot of Loki fans, but Owen Wilson is a draw, and Tom Hiddleston's the best part about this show so far through one episode. Owen Wilson is not very far behind, and that bar is very highly set for the rest of this series.
Yeah, no, it's... to quote Owen Wilson, wow. Like he brought something to that show that I did not realize he was going to bring, and also his acting chops really show through. Like I've seen him in things. I don't know if I've ever seen him in a serious enough role to understand how good of an actor he actually can be, and that really showcased it.
They are they're doing a really good job with these shows where they are getting big name actors to like help draw in casual people. I think Falcon and Winter Soldier, theirs was a surprise, and I won't mention it for those people who might not have seen Falcon and Winter Soldier yet.
Yep.
But WandaVision as well, like, had the big casting with Catherine Hahn, but Catherine Hahn's more of like you got to be into some like really deep comedy stuff, or it's not somebody that you're gonna know.
Yep.
But we saw the casting news with She-Hulk where they're going to bring on the Good Places Tahani character. I'm blanking on her name so hard right now.
Oh, yeah.
But she's in everything right now. She's on Project Runway. She's doing MC jobs. She's hosting a bunch of things. They're starting, like, Oscar Isaac is going to be Moon Knight. They're...
Yep. Jamil, by the way.
There we go.
I pulled up my show notes for the next show. I was like, I know we wrote it.
They're doing this thing where they're bringing in true, maybe not A-listers in terms of what they've done and critically acclaimed stuff, but they're bringing in A-listers where every single person who remotely follows pop culture has an idea of who this person is and can get them in the door, and they're banking on these people's natural talent to to keep them and retain them, because you've got all the hardcore Marvel people hooked. Now you got to work on all the mediums, and it's crazy because my wife who's a teacher of fifth graders was telling me that they would watch WandaVision on lunch breaks. Like, there's a whole generation of like kids who are really into these shows that are getting put out. They really like how they're weird and they're a little bit off the beaten path. And I think Loki is going to fall right in line with that, because after episode 1, it's not Falcon and Winter Soldier. Here's an action movie. We get a little bit weird, and there's a lot of weird humor in it, and I loved every second of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird humor in it, and it actually works really well. Yeah. Overall, I think we were kind of discussing it. Probably the best first episode of any of the shows they've dropped so far. So it gets you hooked. It gets you in and it gets you hooked real quick. So
genuinely surprised that the first episode did such a good job, and from a person who really enjoys reading and watching comics for the long-term character development and like seeing how you can move a character's personality and move their development over a long period of time. This is the first Marvel show that has come out where it takes one episode and you see a ton of development in just one episode. Falcon and Winter Soldier was a real slow burn to get there. Those two characters were really stubborn, and it took almost 5 episodes before you actually saw them move forward with stuff. Same thing with WandaVision. It was a situation where the characters didn't want to move forward, so they didn't until the end. Loki he's going to be stubborn. He doesn't want to move. Owen Wilson is going to make him move forward. He does, and episode 1 ends with an entirely different Loki than we've ever seen, and one that is definitely not good, but he knows he's bad. And that, I think, is the best version of the character, where there's a ton of self-actualization, but no, I'm going to try to be something I'm not. I'm just going to embrace my chaotic evil side. Like, he is definitively like the, not necessarily chaotic neutral, but not true chaotic evil like Joker. He's somewhere in that middle ground of like, I'm definitely going to screw some stuff up, but I'm also sometimes just going to be weird because I can be.
Yep. And that was... God. I'm laughing because there was a point in it where Owen Wilson's character literally asks Loki about that, and you're like, yeah, okay, cool. He's diving in like we're all thinking, and it's really well done. If you haven't checked it out, do it now. And if you checked it or you have any interest in it, well worth a watch.
So if you want to hear more about this and the other great Marvel stuff that came out this week, because holy crap, the video game news that dropped today, we could have gone into that for an entire show.
And not just Marvel. Marvel, DC, we're these notes, let's see, we've got Marvel, we've got DC, we've got Star Wars, we've got Lord of the Rings, and we've got various miscellaneous stuff, as well as the Eisner Awards got dropped. Like, the nominees were dropped. So, yeah. Oh, and also, Truth, Red, White, and Black is finally being collected. So, if, again, random drop, if you haven't read that story, and you read comics, go buy that trade whenever it comes out, because it's 100% worth it.
Yeah, even though I've read that on Unlimited a bunch, I try to collect trades of like really good comic runs, so that way when I'm trying to get people into comics, I can like give them the really here's the really good things. That is one that will be immediately copped from my local comic book store as soon as that comes out. It is a fantastic read. I'm reading the Young Avengers right now on Marvel Unlimited, and love me some Bradley family everything.
Oh, yeah, I'm currently working through X-Force, so I got to catch up on the rest of my X. You know me. So.
Well, this is one heck of a show. This is what happens when we get 12 minutes of me not talking, or I guess it wasn't 12 minutes. This was more like 2 minutes of me not talking.
Yep.
And we fixed it live, and you got to hear us talk about Syracuse, got to hear us talk about Marvel stuff. If you want to keep hearing us talk about Syracuse stuff and other things that we find interesting, make sure that you like this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and make sure you set up notifications so that every time that we go live, you get notified and you can watch us Sunday nights around 8 o'clock Eastern. If you're watching us on Monday in the NunesMagician article, thanks for watching. Thanks for popping over to the site and giving our stuff a read. We will be doing this all summer. We've got some ideas that we're kicking around. Steve is setting up tabletop accounts online so we can play some games, and we might be part of a beta test for a new game. I'm really excited for it.
Oh, we will be.
There's a lot that's going to happen over the summer that is still going to be related to Syracuse, related to college sports, even as the sports don't pick up until September. Well, I guess camp starts in August, so we really only have to fill like the next 2 months worth of content.
And if you want to know way too much information about all of your Orangemen, go check out Get to Know. We drop 2 of them a day. They're always interesting reads. Learn more about your Syracuse football team than you ever possibly wanted to.
We are having, I'm not going to lie, typically Get to Know is a little bit of a drag, which is, to be fair, we're going through a lot of people on the roster. This year feels a little bit different, mostly because we saw most of these guys hit the field in some way, shape, or form because of 2021, which is not normally the case. And that definitely makes it a lot more engaging and interesting. So check those out on the site. Check out Steve at Dutch Heart on Twitter. It's literally right there on the screen. I'm Andy Pregler at AC Pregler. We will be back here next Sunday live at 8 p.m. Eastern-ish. And if you don't want to watch us live, we will have the articles up every Monday as always. So, Steve, thank you for producing and fixing everything as you always do. And Orange?
Go Orange.